Hello, good morning and welcome everybody to today's SciTech Masterclass, Managing Imposter Syndrome. Before we begin, and I'll hand you over to our host today, just a few quick housekeeping points to mention to you. This session is being recorded and will be shared with our members. So if you need to step away from today's session for any reason, you can catch up later. The recording should be available within the next 7 working days, and it'll also be accessible via the updated member area, which hopefully will be going live later today. To minimise background noise, all attendees are muted, but we do encourage interaction through the Q&A feature. So feel free to submit any questions at any time, and we'll aim to answer as many as possible during the dedicated Q&A session at the end. If you experience any technical issues during the event, Microsoft Teams can often be corrected by refreshing your browser or reconnecting. But also, again, just use the chat function for assistance, and I'll look to support where I can. And that's it for me. I'm now going to hand you over to Lisa, who will be hosting today's event. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dominic, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session on breaking the mask and overcoming imposter syndrome. My name's Lisa Ventura. I'm a fellow at CSEC, and I'm also a cybersecurity awareness training practitioner. And I'm joined today by the 2 co-founders of International Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day. So the 3 of us founded this day that takes place on the 13th of April each year. And I'd like to hand over to Nat. I'll come to you first to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm really pleased to be here today, and I actually started this day because I interviewed Kim Adele a few years ago around imposter syndrome. It's got to be about 6 years ago now, and it was really quite a life-changing conversation that I had with her, to be honest. And it made me realize that my confidence and my competence weren't aligned. And hopefully today we are going to share lots of great information with you. Lisa's done a great job of prepping, as has Kim. And since I actually got involved with this, I've changed my whole career, changed my life, moved all over the place, and now I'm the co-founder of something called Monday Influencer, and it's a real pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Nat. And Kim, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, and always love working with you two and raising awareness of imposter syndrome, having been a sufferer for many, many years. Realizing that actually one of the first steps to recovery is talking about it. And yet that's the thing we're never going to do. We're never going to tell anybody we've got it, because then they're going to find out that we're a fraud, which is the thing we're most frightened of, which is one of the reasons why we do things like today. But it's also why I'm about to drop something in the chat, because we would really love to be able to answer your questions. And yet we understand that with a subject like imposter syndrome, asking you to ask a question is really, really hard. And so what I'm going to do, and I've pressed send on it now, is just drop into the chat my email. So if you've got any questions that you would really like the answer to, please just email me, and we will make sure that they are asked and answered anonymously so that you get the help that you need. And other than that, apart from Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day, I also have just had 2 books that have been picked up by a publisher, and I'm a mum, which has been probably my greatest journey to wanting to recover from imposter syndrome so that she doesn't learn to fear her inner child. Lisa, back to you.
Thank you so much, Kim and Nat, and really looking forward to this today with you both. So I'll just cover off a little bit about the objectives for this workshop. So what we hope that you'll gain today from it is to understand imposter syndrome and what it is, and particularly as well in relation to being in the cybersecurity, infosec and tech industries. And we'll cover off a little bit about what it is, its prevalence, and psychological mechanisms around it. We'll also look at equipping you with how you can identify your personal imposter syndrome patterns. So that could be recognizing any potential triggers and thought patterns that are specific to you. And we'll also look at some evidence-based, practical strategies that are backed by research and tooling as well. But also look, and for me, this is really important, how we can help you build that sustainable confidence, and also look at some long-term practices for authentic self-assurance. And so, our hope is that, by the end of this hour or so long's workshop, you'll have a personalized action plan to help you manage and combat imposter syndrome. So, as a little bit of an icebreaker for the moment, if you could just have a bit of a reflection and have a think about, what's one achievement that you're all really proud of, but that you would rarely share, or you don't feel confident in sharing about, and just take a sort of moment or two to think about that silently. And you don't really have to share it in the chat or come off mute or anything to share it. I just want you to have a think about, how does it feel to you to think about this achievement? And did you minimize it in your mind, or did you stop and think, gosh, I did that and I'm so proud of myself for doing that. So just have a little think about that for a second, and just see how it makes you feel. And if you are comfortable with sharing that in the Q&A, just put a note in the chat, and I'll just give you a few seconds on that. Moira, if you want to come off mute and share yours. Oh, Moira. Moira, I don't think you can come off mute. So do you want to share it in the chat, please? And I'll. Oh. Okay. So I'll, as we couldn't get Moira off mute, unfortunately, I'll move on to just having a bit of a chat around what is imposter syndrome. So it was actually defined by two psychologists, Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes. And as a term, it was first coined in around 1978. Now, Clance and Imes, originally, they studied high-achieving women across lots of different demographics. And they found that a lot of high-achieving women had an overarching fear of being found out at any time around their success. And they also attributed their success just to luck or external factors. And they would often discount evidence of their competence. And they also had an intrinsic fear of not living up to the expectations that they had of themselves. And when the term imposter syndrome was coined, it wasn't, and this is a really clear thing to say, it wasn't classified as a mental health disorder, but a common psychological phenomenon. And through their studies as well, which went across lots of different demographics, they found that it affects 70% of people at some point in their lives. And I can talk a little bit about my own experience with imposter syndrome, because I came into the cybersecurity industry back in 2009. Prior to that, I'd spent a number of years working in the entertainment industry, specifically working with Chris Tarrant of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire fame. But as soon as I came into the cybersecurity industry, and I think for me, at the time in 2009, while it's got better today, there really were very few women in tech and cybersecurity. And I think that really led me to having those, feelings of, oh my goodness, I shouldn't be here. I'm a fraud in this industry and I'm going to be found out at any second. And when I get asked to get involved in various initiatives and so on, I would just think, oh, I'm just lucky and so on. So that's how it's really impacted me. And I actually didn't realize that it had a name, that all those feelings had a name, until around 2019 to 2020. And that's when I met Nat and Kim, and that's when we founded International Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day. So I'll just talk a little bit about how it shows up as well. It tends to be around persistent self-doubt despite success, and fear of failure that leads to overworking or procrastination, and an inability to internalize accomplishments, and also around setting unrealistically high goals. So for me, I have a huge degree of perfectionism, and I'm always setting goals that I think are really unrealistic, and I'll never achieve them. And I also have that inner voice all the time, where I'm comparing myself, often unfavorably, to what others are doing in cybersecurity and tech, and wondering why I'm kind of not there yet. Some of those things that I mentioned in terms of that internal self-talk are things like, I've just got lucky doing all this. Everyone's going to realize that I don't know what I'm doing. Everyone else in cyber and tech is smarter and more qualified than me. And I've fooled people into hiring me for roles or promoting me, and I feel that I don't deserve this success. And all this can manifest itself physically as well, with things like anxiety, stress, exhaustion, and perfectionism paralysis, which is something I have a lot of. And in terms of how it who experiences it, I will hand over to Kim, who will be able to talk through the next part of what we're doing.
Right, fabulous. Okay, so how it shows up, I think it shows up differently and similarly for so many of us. Just reading through some of the things that you guys have already shared in the chat, I recognize and acknowledge so many of those feelings. That fear of constantly putting on a face that says, hopefully what I say out here isn't going to mirror what's being said inside my head. And one thing before we get into the common symptoms that I'd like to share, just based off what's on the chat, because hopefully it will help, is one of the things that can be really useful is when somebody gives you an award or somebody gives you a certification, actually they're giving you their belief in you. So borrow that belief, borrow the fact that they wouldn't have done it if you weren't worth it, and use that to help you propel. But when we look at some of the common symptoms, if we get really specific about how imposter syndrome manifests, you might experience persistent self-doubt. Even after getting positive feedback or achieving goals, there's often a fear of failure that leads to two opposing behaviours: overwork to prevent any possibility of failure, or procrastination to avoid situations where failure is possible. Often you'll find people that have got imposter syndrome or in the throes of imposter syndrome are, like I was for many years, become a course junkie, regularly looking for more and more knowledge that they can gather to give them almost an armor against that fear coming up about that failure. Because the more you learn, the less chance there is. And yet, doesn't matter how much you learn, you still got that possibility. People with imposter syndrome can struggle to internalize their accomplishments. I often call this the Primark brush off. So, people give you a compliment, people tell you that you've done something really well. You kind of almost want to get rid of it as soon as possible so that nobody thinks you're bigger than you should be. So you might say, you look really lovely today. Oh, this is just £5 from Primark. And we distance ourselves from it. And they'll attribute their success to external factors, the team, luck, easy tasks, being in the right place. I'll be honest, I once won an award and I went through all of those and then also followed it up with, they must have a point to prove. I mean, how ridiculous is that? But that's what I thought. They'd got something to tell other people and they were just using it. So rather than our own contributions, and they often set unrealistically high goals, thinking that only perfection will prove their worth. Comparison becomes toxic, and instead of learning from others, they use other success as evidence of their own inadequacy. And that's escalated by the compare and despair society we live in with social media. The internal self-talk, which can be debilitating, that dialogue is particularly damaging because wherever you go, and you take that voice with you. So listen for phrases in your own mind. I just got lucky. They're going to realize I don't know what I'm doing. Everybody else is smarter than me. I fooled them into hiring me. I don't deserve this success. I'm not enough. These aren't occasional thoughts, but reoccurring patterns that shape decision-making and behavior. And there's a physical impact. It's not just mental. Imposter syndrome creates real physical stress, anxiety, exhaustion from overworking, procrastination, paralysis, and perfectionism that prevent completion of tasks. And your body keeps the score of this psychological stress. It can be really overwhelming in those moments where you really need to be able to be a better friend to yourself. But let's move on to who experiences it. So Lisa, I believe it's back to you.
So the reality is that 70% of people experience imposter syndrome at least once. And it affects, everyone regardless of gender. But studies do show that women are more likely to experience imposter syndrome. Anyone at any age can experience it, right from students to retirees to high-powered CEOs. It really doesn't discriminate. And in terms of career stage, it could be beginners and experts. And the phenomenon can often increase with promotion. And while it's prevalent across lots of different industries, again, studies have shown that it can be more prevalent in cybersecurity, tech, healthcare, academia, leadership, and sometimes as well in creative fields. And just covering off a little bit about the whole who experiences it piece. It might surprise you to know that there are a raft of celebrities and famous people who suffer from imposter syndrome, right through from the poet Maya Angelou to Albert Einstein. And even for me, I'm a huge fan of the rock band Queen, and I love Freddie Mercury, Queen's obviously lead singer. And Freddie would often be absolutely plagued by feelings of imposter syndrome to the point that he would be physically sick before he went out and did a live performance. And the story goes that before he did his iconic Live Aid performance back in July 1985, he was so plagued by imposter syndrome that he nearly didn't go on. He was physically sick. He went out, he did deliver that iconic 20-minute set, came off stage, and then was saying to the rest of the band, "Was I all right, darlings? Do you think that they all liked me?" And I just think, if somebody like Freddie could have these feelings of imposter syndrome, I think any of us could absolutely have them. And I'll just talk a little bit as well about a couple of myths around it, in terms of it's often thought that only beginners feel like imposters. But actually, the feeling of imposter syndrome often it intensifies with success and new challenges. And then another one is it's just humility. But humility acknowledges others' contributions, while imposter syndrome denies you your own extremely valid contributions. And so I'm going to hand back over to Kim, who's going to talk about the 5 different types of imposters. Sorry, Kim, can you hear us?
Sorry, I was still on mute, wasn't I?
Yeah.
That's very helpful. So what I was saying is, before we get into that part, what I'd like to do is just share something that I was in the middle of responding to Mark, but I think it might be helpful to everybody in the group from the bits they're putting in the chat. And that is, an amazing award, Mark. So congratulations. I can see why you're proud. And the bit that I wanted to share that hopefully might help, which is a bit of a reframing thing, is ask yourself, do you trust the Prince of Lekistan, Prince Alois, actually is trustworthy and honest? Do you believe they actually want to put good out into the world? And as long as you believe that, then the fact that they've given you the award is them giving you their belief in what you did. And for me, one of my great breakthrough moments, I shared earlier that I won an award and I convinced myself that actually they've got a point to play. And that was one of my pivotal moments, because I remembered at one point the guy who gave me the award was a gentleman called Paul Stobart, who was one of the best leaders I've ever had the privilege to work with. And I aspired to be like him. And I caught myself in this moment where I was like, well, if only he knew. If he knew what I knew, he'd know I was hopeless. And I was spiraling in that. And then I suddenly thought for a moment, I went, hold on. Are you saying that your opinion is better and more credible than Paul's opinion? Well, that made absolutely no sense to me, because my opinion wasn't very valid. And yet I realized that inadvertently I was allowing myself to dismiss his view and to make my view that I was rubbish more important and more credible. And so in that moment, I decided to stop doing that and to borrow his belief and his view. So if he thought I deserved the award, then I deserved the award, and I do my best to not let him down. And I'm hoping that that reframe might help Mark and the other people in the chat to just think about, could you reframe that, and would that allow you to now sit proudly with the achievements that you quite rightly deserve? But I'll move back on to the 5 types of imposter. And what I'd say with these types is, have a think as we're going through them. Do you recognize yourself in any of these, or do you recognize yourself in a few of them? Sometimes it can be situational that they flop up. So Dr. Valerie Young identified the 5 distinct types of imposter syndrome. Understanding your type's crucial, because the strategies that work for one might not work for another. But it's also crucial to understand that you may have more than one of them, and they may show up in different circumstances. So the first one is the perfectionist. Perfectionists set impossibly high goals and feel shame when they fall short of 100%. They micromanage others because they don't trust anyone else to meet their standards. They focus on flaws and mistakes rather than overall success. If you're a perfectionist, you might think, I can't do it perfectly, I shouldn't do it at all. You probably have trouble delegating and feel like failures are personal character flaws rather than learning opportunities. Next, you've got the expert. So experts fear being exposed as inexperienced or unknowledgeable. They won't apply for jobs unless they meet 100% of the criteria. They hesitate to speak up in meetings unless they're absolutely certain that they're correct. You might be an expert type if you're constantly seeking additional certifications, avoiding situations where you're not the most knowledgeable person, or staying silent when you could contribute valuable insight. Our next one is the natural genius. Natural geniuses expect to master things quickly and easily. When they face challenges or need to put in effort, they feel shame or inadequacy. They avoid tasks where success isn't guaranteed. This type often stems from childhood praise for being smart rather than working hard. If you avoid challenges because you might not excel immediately, or if needing to study or practice feels like evidence of inadequacy, you might be a natural genius type. And there's been studies that prove that actually if we praise people, whether that's children or adults, for the success, over time, we teach them to be fearful of getting things wrong. Whereas if we praise people for trying, for progress, then actually we start to dilute that fear that we attach to that perfectionism. You've then got the soloists. Soloists believe asking for help reveals weakness or inadequacy. They feel they need to accomplish things independently to prove their worth. They often take on too much and burn out rather than seek support. If you frame requests for help as imposing on others, or if you believe that needing assistance means that you're not qualified for your role, you're very likely a soloist. And then you've got the super person. Super people need to excel in all areas of life simultaneously: work, family, fitness, social life, hobbies. They sacrifice personal needs and relationships for work success. They measure success by how many roles they can judge perfectly. This type is particularly common among women and people from underrepresented groups who feel pressure to prove themselves in multiple ways simultaneously. So I'm going to hand over to Nat, who's going to take us through a quick quiz to just go over what we've learned so far before we move into the next part. Nat, to you.
Thank you very much. It's actually quite amazing how we get conditioned over our lifetimes to have this vision of ourselves, and that's really quite relevant to imposter syndrome. So for me, when I actually read this list, I was just quite confused because I thought I could actually be multiple different aspects of this could actually apply to me at any point during the day, probably. Not that I'm schizophrenic or anything, but I think certainly there is a type which resonates most strongly with you. So which type resonates most strongly with you? Please do let us know if you want to give us that info. And can you identify with multiple types as I have? And I think certainly these patterns do show up most strongly at different times based upon what you're working on at the time. So when do these patterns show up most strongly? And what specific situations trigger these feelings? I mean, just as an example, I think for me, like perhaps waking up in the morning and having a big task, a huge agenda during the day, that might trigger a specific feeling. Yeah, I'll be very interested if you guys want to sort of let us know what you think.
Thank you, Nat. So I'll just pick up in terms of before we start looking at the root causes and triggers of imposter syndrome. Let's just take a second to acknowledge how it might have shown up in your life. And this isn't about judgment or shame, but it's about recognition and understanding yourself. So have a think about a specific time where you did feel like an imposter. And maybe it was around starting a new job, giving a presentation like this one, or achieving some or receiving, some other recognition. Have a think about, what were the circumstances? What thoughts were going through your head, and how did it affect your behavior? And again, feel free to share any insights on this in the chat if you feel comfortable enough to doing so. But understanding your personal patterns is the first step to changing them. And the goal isn't about eliminating, all self-doubt, because some self-reflection is healthy, and it's that keeps us growing. So I think the goal is to distinguish between productive self-reflection and destructive self-sabotage. And as we move on to looking at root causes and triggers, I'll hand over to Kim on this.
Fab, thank you so much. So there are many root causes and triggers, but some of the most common are childhood experience. So imposter syndrome often has really deep roots. Family dynamics that emphasized achievement over effort teach children that love and acceptance are conditional on performance. When praise focuses on being smart rather than working hard, children learn to fear challenges that might reveal that they're not naturally gifted. Excuse me. Messages about needing to be perfect, to be worthy, create impossible standards. Constant comparison to siblings or peers teaches us that our value is relative to other people's performance. We've then got cultural and social factors. So stereotype threats affects people from underrepresented groups who face additional pressure to prove they belong. When you rarely see people who look like you in leadership or expert roles, it's natural to question whether or not you fit. Social media has intensified this comparison culture. We see others highlight reels and compare them to the behind the scenes struggles that we're going through. And we see the messy reality and find ourselves lacking. Cultural messages about success often ignore the role of privilege, systemic barriers, and pure chance. Then we've got the workplace factor. So competitive environments can trigger imposter syndrome, especially when collaboration is discouraged. Lack of feedback leaves people guessing about their performance. Being the only one, the only woman, the only person of colour, or the only young person creates additional pressure to represent your entire group. Rapid promotion can trigger imposter syndrome, even when you know it's well deserved. New responsibilities naturally involve a learning curve, but imposters interpret this as evidence that they're unqualified. I know from people in the chat often that starting something new, that next step, can be the thing that takes us right back to the throes of that imposter syndrome. And then we've got neurodivergence, easy for me to say, and intersectionality. Neurodivergent individuals often develop masking behaviours to fit in, which can feel like being an imposter. Different communication or working styles may be misunderstood and leading to self-doubt. People with multiple marginalised identities face compounding pressures, and the intersection of gender, race, sexuality, disability, or other identities creates unique challenges that aren't addressed by a one-size-fits-all approach. It's also worth noting that you can have a number of these. So you kind of had it start off in that childhood experience. We come up with these I am statements at the age of 7, and we enforce them at the age of 14, and we embed them at the age of 21. And if we don't go back and address them, they're our underlying blueprint. But then we move in to the workplace, and we have additional factors that build on this barrier that we've created. And we're also impacted by everything around us socially and culturally. So it becomes a melting pot of where those triggers are. But the good news is you can, once you've identified them, start to find ways that move away from them. And talking about that and that reframing, I'm going to pass to Lisa around how do we reframe that inner critic.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kim. And I'll just quickly touch on the neuro piece, because I myself am neurodivergent. I was diagnosed with autism in 2018. And then in addition to that, with ADHD, dyspraxia and dyscalculia in 2023. So I've masked, my behaviours and masked myself in order to try and fit in cybersecurity and tech, in the workplace, you name it. I always felt that I had to look at what everybody else was doing and mimic that in order to be accepted, in order to fit in, and also to be able to communicate in a way that was understood, because I was often misunderstood in the workplace as a result of being neurodivergent. But I'll move on to looking at reframing that inner critic. And our inner critic will often speak to us in absolutes or catastrophes, and it'll often take those partial truths and it turns them into complete condemnation. So cognitive reframing isn't just about positive thinking or self-delusion. It's about that accuracy and finding that balance. So, for example, when your inner critic says to you, I don't know what I'm doing, challenge it with specific evidence. So, what tasks have you completed successfully? What problems have you solved in your workplace? And what positive feedback have you received? And I also know how difficult that is, because whenever I receive any positive feedback, that gets sort of pushed to one side of, oh, I'm not sure I should have received that. Perhaps they didn't mean it. And the tiniest little bit of either negative feedback or something that's just not constructive, that's the bit that I'll home in on, and I won't forget about, and I'll be constantly ruminating on in terms of how could I have changed that? How could I have done it differently? And one of the things that works for me that I hope might work for you is to start keeping a record, and not just about of all your major achievements, which of course it should be in there and they're absolutely crucial, but perhaps around those daily competencies. And that could be, a digital file. It could be an app that you use. It could be just an old-fashioned journal or notepad and paper. But start answering those difficult questions of, it's like, have you helped a colleague today? Have you completed a project or some tasks on time? And write it down. And for me, because I struggle a lot with my mental health and burnout as well, sometimes those achievements for me could be as simple as, I actually got out of bed this morning and I took my dog for a walk and I got to my desk and I was able to then get on with the work that I had planned today, and those tasks that I'd set myself. And sometimes those achievements could be as simple as that. And even yesterday, I had lots of things happen that I really just didn't feel like I wanted to get up and get started. But I pushed through it, and I did. And my achievement was that I did exactly that, that I got out of bed and I'd shown up for the day. So start keeping that record, because when you look back on it, you can really see how much value you add, how much you've done, and how much you've accomplished. And also ask yourself, what would I tell a friend in this situation? Because very often we're much kinder and more realistic with others than we are with ourselves. And that external perspective is much closer to reality than your inner critic ever will be to yourself. Also, another strategy I've got is around thought replacement. So look at replacing those distorted thoughts with balanced ones. So instead of thinking, I just got lucky, try thinking to yourself, I prepared well and I took advantage of an opportunity. So both preparation and opportunity will matter for success. And also replace thoughts such as, everyone knows more than me, to everyone has different expertise, including me, and my expertise is valid. And this will acknowledge that knowledge is distributed and that no one knows everything. And actually, that's something that I see a lot within the cybersecurity and tech and infosec industry. People often look to us all to be the font of knowledge on absolutely everything. And there's absolutely no way that we can be. And for myself, I didn't come from that technical background into cybersecurity and tech. But my focus was always on the human factors around cybersecurity and social engineering and cyber psychology. And that's the area that I focused on. And don't be afraid if somebody asks you something and you don't know the answer to it. I often get asked a lot of, could I take part in, this talk, or could I contribute to an article, or could I, just answer various questions? And sometimes those things are really technical, and it's absolutely fine that I don't know the answer. I will actually openly say that's out of my area of expertise, but I can, look for somebody that can answer that question or take part in that event for you instead of me. So don't be afraid to to challenge that. And if it's something that you don't know, it's absolutely okay. To back that on to somebody else that can answer the question, and actually say it isn't something that's within your area of expertise. So, always think about that. Everyone has different expertise, including me, and mine is valid. And also, instead of saying I'm a fraud, try saying instead, I'm learning and growing like everyone else, because this normalizes the ongoing nature of professional development. Um, and also using effective affirmations that are really specific and believable can help as well. So, try saying to yourself things like, I belong in the spaces that I occupy. My perspective adds value. I'm allowed to learn and make mistakes. And my success is earned through my efforts and abilities. So, just try using some of those techniques to reframe that inner critic. And I'm now going to hand over to Nat, who's going to cover some confidence builders.
I'm really, really sorry, Nat, before you go. I'm so sorry to everybody here. I've just had the school on and my little girl's had an accident, so I'm going to have to leave.
Oh my goodness.
God.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm really
Jump on
sorry.
in.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wow.
Oh dear. Yeah. Well, I think back to what you're saying, Lisa. I think before I dig into the practical confidence building strategies, I think it's very important to address what happens when we wake up in the morning, and actually taking a pen, a piece of paper, or a pencil and writing down what we think about ourselves can be the most beneficial thing that you can do. And actually crossing it out, if you're not happy with what you're thinking about yourself, you need to cross it out and you need to write something new. And I think that's something that Kim taught me about 5 years ago. And probably for about a month, maybe 6 weeks, I did this every single day. And I woke up in the morning and I was saying some awful things to myself, and I just crossed them out. And I was like, and I thought about the evidence that something that was the opposite of what I was actually thinking was there. And most of the time you can cross these out, and you can rationally cross out the negative, and then you combine this with your brag file or your wins journal, and you basically create your achievements. You document your achievements and the positive feedback, the projects you've done, including really tough things that you've overcome. You might be at your wit's end. You might think the world is falling down, but once you make it through that, it teaches you something. Everything that you do teaches you something. And it's really important to review what you've done. And actually, each day you can, at the end of the day, you can actually list 3 things that you overcame, three things that you have done which you're proud of during that day. And for some people, some days it might be just getting out of bed might be tough. If you're suffering from depression or anxiety, it might be overcoming your fear of public speaking or being at meetings, or whatever it really is. But the most important thing is that these build upon your confidence. They build upon your authority, credibility, and why you're different and better than anybody else. And being half British and half American, I have a real problem with that, because my father, he went to MIT, bless him. He's 92 years old now, and he used to always say really great things about himself. And growing up as a child, I was quite embarrassed by him because he was a bit older than all the other parents. But looking back now, he was kind of showing me what you really have to do is to actually say, hold on a minute, I'm really good at this. And that's something that we all struggle with, being British, because we don't like to brag. We don't like to stand up and tell the world why we're amazing. But you know what? Now you have to do that. If you don't do it, someone else is going to do it. And this is something that you got to remember. So take the time every day to write down the 3 things that really went well for you, and build that into a document. And then every time you actually have to go and question yourself because you're saying something negative, go in there and have a look at what you've actually said. And I love the fact that Lisa put this power posing and physiology thing in here, because I watched an Amy Cuddy TED talk probably about 7-8 years ago. And she actually talks about this in her TED talk, and it makes a massive difference if you actually stand up, or you put your feet on the desk and your hands behind your head, and you boost your testosterone, and actually you balance your positive feel-good hormones, and it makes a huge difference. And they actually did tests on this, whereby people went into a fake job interview, and half of the people were told to look at their phone, to look down and behave like this before the interview, and the other half were told to stand up, go in and look at themselves in the mirror, and stand there with their hands on their hips and make themselves feel big. And this stuff just makes a massive difference. In particular, the body language, the shoulders back, the posture, the firm handshake, all of these things are massively important. The voice and mindset anchoring thing, I mean, look, I've done 500 plus interviews. I've interviewed so many people. And when I hear my own voice, I can't stand it. It drives me absolutely crazy. And in the beginning, you might well go through that, even if you're not going to actually share it with anyone, apart from your mother, perhaps, if she's still alive. And it really will help you if you can talk about yourself in a positive way. It massively will help you. It's almost like a form of self-hypnosis in some ways, and it's all really connected to building your personal brand and actually talking about yourself in a positive light, so other people understand how good you are at what you do. And when it comes to social proof strategies, these really, for me, are a combination of testimonials, perhaps tweets. You can obviously, copy and, screenshot things. If people say positive things about you, you can screenshot them. That can be quite useful. It depends on what sort of part of business you're in. If you're quite visual, if you're quite visible in front of the world, then and you have your own business, then getting Google reviews can be great. But I do think getting testimonials on LinkedIn is a fantastic thing. Lisa, I owe you one of those. It's on my mind, and I know and we know. So it's on my mind to do that. And these things are really important. You can also get video testimonials. They are really, really powerful. I've got a few of those somewhere, but I think it's certainly important to create a visual portfolio of your work, even if that is like a one-pager. What I did is I actually created a one-pager using Canva probably about 5 years ago. And each year I've added the massive things that have happened to me, like the huge transformations that have sort of led me to the point where I'm at in my career. And that's something that you can do if you want to share that with people. It can actually be a different form of your CV. It could be just the front of your CV, which is like a timeline view, much like if you've ever been onto the Guinness website, you can actually see there's a timeline with points of how Guinness was actually created, where it is today, who bought it, etc., etc. So But I do also think that having mentors who can provide perspective on your growth and guidance, and who can improve your confidence, those mentors and coaches and business partners, perhaps employees, they can all really help, because you're here to build each other up, right? And you are who you surround yourself with. And this is something that really, I'd rather have a smaller circle of true loyal people who support me versus a circle of people that is massively wide, who really don't add any value to my life, right? And this is something that I've been working on. I've probably had about 5 mentors in the last 30 years, I think. And each one kind of gets you ready for the next one. And I think it's great to work with Lisa and with Kim on International Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day and our work here. And I want to thank you, Lisa, for everything that you do here. And back over to you.
Thank you, Nat. And I'm going to cover now some sustainable strategies for lasting change. So one of the first things that I'd say is get your peer support system in place, and find or create groups with people that are facing similar challenges to yourself. So mastermind groups, professional networks, like CSEC. I've had I'm in some amazing groups on here, and I've met some incredible, really supportive people through being a member and now subsequently a fellow of CSEC. And also finding those informal peer support groups, because these can help you provide that much needed perspective and accountability. And when you hear others articulate struggles similar to yours, it can normalize the experience and also reduce that shame that many of us often feel around it. And I have been looking at all the interaction and all the comments in the chat on this, and that's exactly what I mean. Just seeing a lot of that is so I guess validating as well, and it helps me to feel that I'm not alone with all this that I feel. Also have that regular self-assessment with yourself, using that objective criteria to help you combat the distortions that imposter syndrome provides. So set both learning goals and performance goals, because learning goals will help you to focus on development and reduce the pressure for immediate perfection. And also look at getting that 360-degree feedback to get that complete picture of your impact, because often our self-perception is more negative than others' perceptions of us. And that feedback can provide those crucial reality checks that we all need. Also, look at your courage-based leadership. So, growth does often require discomfort. So take on stretch assignments that challenge you out of your comfort zone, but also ensure you have that adequate support as well. And speak up in meetings, even if you sometimes feel that you're not 100% certain, because your perspective may be valuable, even if it's not perfect. And just touching on challenges that are out of your comfort zone, I got asked at the end of last week to come on to ITV Central News and talk about the Jaguar Land Rover cyber attack and what happened. And my first thought was to just go, no, I couldn't possibly do this. Why on earth are they asking me? There's far more worthy people that could be asked to do this. But I did jump out of my comfort zone to be interviewed for ITV Central News last Thursday. And then as a result, I got contacted by BBC Midlands Today, the local BBC News in my area. And they came to interview me also about the Jaguar Land Rover cyber attack yesterday. And that went out last night. And then literally just before I joined this call with Nat and Kim, I got an email asking me to go on BBC Radio WM to also talk about it. And all of that is well out of my comfort zone. But I guess I kind of felt the fear inside, felt that inner imposter. And I just went, do you know what? I'm going to do this anyway. And I've actually thoroughly enjoyed doing it all, and contributing as well. So just touching as well on that ongoing development, continuous learning will build that genuine expertise, which provides that strong foundation for confidence. But balance this as well with accepting that you just don't have to know everything to contribute value, because as I mentioned before, you really don't. So I'll move on a little bit as well to talking about having your own action plan and a commitment to change. So some of the things that I've put on here is things like, look at letting go of one limiting thought that you've got, identifying the most damaging thought pattern that you hold, write it down, and then do this. Physically just tear up or delete the paper or delete the file. Just get rid of it and replace it with a much more balanced and evidence-based thought process. The next thing that you can do is to choose 3 strategies to implement. So select from today's toolkit, and I'll share these slides so that you can all receive a copy of them afterwards. Based on the imposter type that you identified for yourself. Make them specific and measurable, and set a timeline for implementation. So start this week on them and identify any potential obstacles and solutions. And then some concrete actions that you can take. Start a weekly wins journal. So, document, every week, all those wins, all those achievements, everything that you've done over the course of the week. Practice 1 power pros before important meetings, and ask for feedback from someone within 2 weeks. Join at least 1 professional networking group, or even such as this one. And most importantly, if you find yourself having any negative thoughts, challenge at least 1 negative self-thought that you have every day. So to finish off, Nat, I don't know if you want to just take this one and just go through some of the resources that we've put together as well that might help a bit further.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's fantastic. You mentioned Amy Cuddy there.
Yeah.
It's she really is quite inspirational. And I think she said, what did she say exactly in that video? It's been so many years since I've watched it. It's sort of like basically just pretending you are the person that you want to be. I think she talks to university students in that video in particular. It's quite interesting, actually. She's absolutely super. But some of these things are some of these resources are amazing. The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women I haven't read, clearly. But the Confidence Code, I've heard of that one. And yeah, I mean, we have masses and masses of resources as well on our iisad.org website, which we update every year, because we do this Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day. So we have lots and lots of blogs on there, and please do feel free to reach out to Lisa and I if there's anything specific that you want to sort of learn about. But if I'm brutally honest, I think actually doing that one thing of crossing out what you believe about yourself is probably the most important thing that you can actually do. Certainly from my experience of studying this the last 5+ years, it's absolutely massive. And Oh, really? Thanks, Jack. Thanks for sharing that. Sorry, I got distracted by the chat there. But yeah, I mean, literally, there are so many resources out there right now. You can kind of kick this into shape, really. And for me, I don't write down my achievements, but before bed, before I'm going to sleep, I lie down and I actually think about one thing that I was really happy about during the day. And that's something that is just massive. It makes a huge difference. Even, especially when you're learning new skills, if you can look back and you're learning something new and you can look back and you say, oh, I learned this new thing today, or I did this really well. Those things just make a massive steps forward. But I like the idea of these confidence building apps and tracking tools. I think all of these resources are absolutely super. And yeah, thank you, Lisa, for putting that together.
Thank you, Nat. And we're going to wrap up soon, but I would love to open up the floor for any questions or anything that you want to share in the chat. I've been trying to keep up with everything that you've all been sharing, and there's so much that resonates with me in there. And yes, indeed, there is a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, Susan Jeffers. And that's another book that I would absolutely recommend you having a look at. I learned a lot from that book in terms of having that's to fear, as I talked about with all the media stuff I've done about the Jaguar Land Rover cyber attack, but going ahead and doing it anyway. And oh my goodness, I can't tell you, it really, I did feel sort of quite cringe about it. My husband got home from work last night. We always have the BBC 6 o'clock news on to see what's going on, and then Midlands Today afterwards. And then just seeing and hearing myself on Midlands Today, I felt like I wanted the ground to sort of open up and swallow me whole for a second. But then actually I was like, oh my goodness, I actually did this. And I actually felt quite accomplished that I'd done it, and also shared some of those critical insights about Jaguar Land Rover, because one of the key things for me is how everybody involved in trying to contain what's happened are going to be working around the clock. And I really wanted to get across as well that the impact that that would have on them as they try to get the plant restarted and everybody back to work and so on. Not to underestimate the impact and the pressure that everybody involved in getting JLR back up and running again, the impact that it will have on everyone.
Yeah, that's
so,
amazing, Lisa. It's amazing that you did that. And it's funny how, if you had not accepted the opportunity, you would have lost that experience, and actually you would have damaged your confidence. And that's why I just think, if that film with is it Jim Carrey, where you say yes to everything, and like, but Dominic here says the key takeaway is, what are the lies you're telling yourself about yourself, and what is the truth? And I think that is absolutely massive. He exactly right. So well done, Lisa. I think everyone will agree with me on that. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in.
Thank you. Thank you all, everyone, for joining us today. And I'm just going to put my email address in the chat. So if anyone would like to get in touch to talk about this further, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you have if you don't want to share them on the chat. But it's been an absolute pleasure to do this today. And wishing everybody all the best, and thank you all for joining us.
Absolutely, and feel free to connect with all three of us on LinkedIn. We'll be happy to chat.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Nat. And we hope Kim's news is not too serious. Please pass on our good wishes. And thanks to everybody attending. A recording and slides will be shared probably next week, and hope you have a fabulous rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.